Okay, hello. I have a story today which is one of Aesop's fables. Now it's a short story, and if you don't know Aesop, then Aesop was a writer who lived 2,500 years ago in Greece, and apparently he was also a slave, but he created lots of these stories, though he didn't actually write them at the time, but he told these stories, and he told many, many, many stories. And lots of these stories have now been written down and are carried through many cultures, and people have been telling them for a long time. I don't know about in your country, but in the UK, Aesop's fables are still very famous. And there are particular stories that are more famous than others, and everyone knows. This is a relatively well-known one. Now, first of all, what's a fable? Well, a fable is a short story. It usually has animals as the main characters. We often tell them to children, and most importantly, they have a message, or what we call a moral. There's a moral to the story. And the moral is the lesson that we learn after reading the story, because all of these stories have a lesson that they teach, or a moral, and they teach us something about life. So I suppose that's why commonly we tell them to children as well, because we want to teach children about different ideas and different values so they can learn and they can know how to deal with difficult situations or different situations in life. So I will read the story first, and then I'm going to read it section by section, and we can discuss the vocabulary and also discuss a little bit the message of the story and what the story tries to tell. So, The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse. That's the title. A town mouse once visited a relative who lived in the country. For lunch, the country mouse served wheat stalks, roots and acorns, with a dash of cold water for drinking. The town mouse ate very sparingly, nibbling a little of this and a little of that, and by her manner making it very plain that she ate the simple food only to be polite. After the meal, the friends had a long talk, or rather, the town mouse talked about her life in the city while the country mouse listened. They then went to bed in a cosy nest in the hedgerow and slept in quiet and comfort until morning. In her sleep, the country mouse dreamed she was a town mouse, with all the luxuries and delights of city life that her friend had described for her. So the next day, when the town mouse asked the country mouse to go home with her to the city, she gladly said yes. When they reached the mansion in which the town mouse lived, they found on the table in the dining room the leavings of a very fine banquet. There were sweetmeats and jellies, pastries, delicious cheeses, indeed the most tempting foods that a mouse can imagine. But just as the country mouse was about to nibble a dainty bit of pastry, she heard a cat mew loudly and scratch at the door. In great fear, the mice scurried to a hiding place, where they lay quite still for a long time, hardly daring to breathe. When at last they ventured back to the feast, the door opened suddenly, and in came the servants to clear the table, followed by the house dog. The country mouse stopped in the town mouse's den only long enough to pick up her carpet bag and umbrella. "You may have luxuries and dainties that I have not," she said as she hurried away, "but I prefer my plain food and simple life in the country, with the peace and security that go with it." So that's the story. It's a very short one. So I'll read a little section, and then we can talk about the vocabulary and then talk about the message of the story. A town mouse once visited a relative who lived in the country. For lunch, the country mouse served wheat stalks, roots and acorns, with a dash of cold water for drinking. So first of all, the town mouse visited a relative, so someone in their family, someone they're related to. And for lunch, the country mouse served wheat stalks. Now, wheat is something that we grow in a field, or a farmer grows in order to make flour or make bread. And the stalks are the parts that the wheat grows on, and I don't think usually we eat those, so that would be something not very nice to eat, but obviously that's the kind of thing that a mouse would eat, I guess. A normal mouse in reality. As well as roots and acorns. With a dash of cold water for drinking. A dash is just a little bit of a drink, just a dash. It's a bit like a splash. You can ask for that when you're out with your friends, or maybe they offer you a drink and you think, oh, I don't want to drink much alcohol, but I'll have a dash. I'll just have a dash of red wine. So that just means a small glass. Or I'll just have a splash of red wine, you can also say. Now, the town mouse ate very sparingly, nibbling a little of this and a little of that, and by her manner making it very plain that she ate the simple food only to be polite. So, the town mouse ate very sparingly, so that means she didn't eat much. She only ate a little bit here, a little bit there. If you do something sparingly, it means you're not doing it much. I could say, if I have some really nice ingredients in my cupboard, like saffron. Saffron is a very expensive ingredient. I don't have it in my cupboard, but if I did, I would maybe only use it sparingly. So only when I need to, and just only a little bit. So if you do something sparingly, you're just doing it just a little bit every now and then, as little as you can, basically. You're being very careful about it. So she only ate very sparingly. Nibbling. Nibbling a little of this and a little of that. So if you nibble, that's how basically we think of mice when they eat their food, because they hold up something and then they go. So nibbling means not putting something right into your mouth, but just biting it at the end and eating it slowly that way. And by her manner making it very plain that she ate the simple food only to be polite. And by her manner means, and by acting that way, the manner she was acting, the way she was acting, making it very plain that she ate the simple food only to be polite. So making it very obvious, or making it very clear to the other mouse that she was just trying to be polite. So we can see that probably the town mouse thinks that she's a bit better than the country mouse, because she's not pretending to really enjoy the meal. She doesn't mind being obvious that she's only eating to be polite, and that's the only reason. She actually doesn't like the food. After the meal, the friends had a long talk, or rather, the town mouse talked about her life in the city while the country mouse listened. They then went to bed in a cosy nest in the hedgerow and slept in quiet and comfort until morning. So a hedgerow is the same as a hedge. So a hedge is that green bush that you can grow in your garden, and you usually grow it around the edges of the garden, so it acts like a fence. So you don't need a fence, you can just grow a hedge at the edge of the garden. Or maybe you see in one of those amazing gardens that has a maze, and it might have a maze made of hedges. So a hedgerow is simply one row of a hedge. So they slept under that. In her sleep, the country mouse dreamed she was a town mouse, with all the luxuries and delights of city life that her friend had described for her. So the next day, when the town mouse asked the country mouse to go home with her to the city, she gladly said yes. If you do something gladly, you do it happily. If someone invites me to a party, I might say, I'll come gladly. I'll gladly come. Thank you very much. So it's a little formal, but yeah, we can say that. When they reached the mansion in which the town mouse lived, they found on the table in the dining room the leavings of a very fine banquet. So when they reached the mansion, a mansion is a very grand, big house. A beautiful, big grand house. If we think of the Queen lives in Buckingham Palace, and Buckingham Palace is a mansion. It's a massive, amazing, beautiful house. They found on the table in the dining room the leavings of a very, very fine banquet. Leavings is really weird. I've never really read that before. But just like you should, if you come across a word and you think, what? You just have to interpret it based on the sentence. So here, I think it means the same as the leftovers of a very fine banquet. So what has been left, or what they have left after they've eaten their meal. Because obviously this is a house in which humans live, so these humans have had an amazing meal, they haven't eaten everything, and there are the leavings or leftovers of this very fine banquet. And a banquet is a very big grand meal again. Just like a mansion is a big grand house, a banquet is a big grand meal where you're going to have lots and lots and lots of food. If I think of a banquet, I think of big roast chickens and big roast ducks, lots of different dishes with vegetables in, a massive range of choice of food, etc. That would be a banquet. There were sweetmeats and jellies, pastries, delicious cheeses, indeed the most tempting foods that a mouse can imagine. So sweetmeats are not meat actually, but this is an old traditional word for food, so we don't say this anymore, but it's a type of candied fruit. Candied fruit is fruit that's dried and coated in sugar, so usually it would be raisins, and raisins are grapes. Raisins, sultanas, maybe apples or pears, bananas, these fruits, and when they're dried and then coated in sugar. And jellies. Well, jelly is gelatin, which we take from bone, crush the bone up, you get gelatin, and then you can combine it with sugar and water, and you can create a jelly. A jelly is something you put on a plate and it wibble wobbles, we say, because we have a nursery rhyme in English which is wibble wobble, jelly on a plate. Wibble wobble, jelly on a plate. So, jellies as well. Pastries. Again, pastry is a big group of different types of foods which include a kind of bready outside, and they can be filled with meat, and they can be filled with vegetables, they can be filled with cheese, they can be filled with fruit, so they can be sweet or they can be savoury. So pastries could be a lot of different things, but it always involves a kind of bread part of this type of food. Delicious cheeses, indeed the most tempting foods that a mouse can imagine. But just as the country mouse was about to nibble a dainty bit of pastry, she heard a cat mew loudly and scratch at the door. So, just as this mouse was about to start nibbling this piece of pastry, this dainty bit of pastry. Dainty means small and elegant. So if you have like a really nice pastry and just a little bit of it, you could say it's a dainty piece. Or maybe you could talk about someone's hands, and you might say that that lady has really dainty hands. So they're small, thin, elegant, beautiful. Dainty is a slightly strange word, but it sort of describes a smallness and a beautifulness and an elegance to something. She heard a cat mew loudly. Now mew is the same as meow. We can say it in two different ways, and we can also write it in two different ways. We can write it as M-E-O-W, meow, or if we say mew, normally M-E-W. But they're the same thing, it's just we have kind of two different ways of spelling the same word and saying the same word. And scratch at the door. In great fear, the mice scurried to a hiding place, where they lay quite still for a long time, hardly daring to breathe. So they scurried. We had this in a previous story. So running really quickly, if you're scurrying, usually on four legs. So we can use this to talk about an animal moving, because animals usually move on four legs. But if we scurried as humans, it would usually mean on four legs. Usually, not always, but it has that kind of idea that we think of, moving very quickly on four legs. So the mice scurried to a hiding place, and then they were hardly daring to breathe. So they were too afraid to breathe. They wouldn't dare breathe. If they dare do something, it means that they are more confident, and they think, oh, it's fine. I can be noisy, I can breathe loudly. But if they're hardly daring to breathe, it means they're not even taking a breath because they're so scared. When at last they ventured back to the feast, the door opened suddenly, and in came the servants to clear the table, followed by the house dog. When they ventured back to the feast. So think of venture being like the word adventure. If you venture somewhere, usually it's to a new place. But I think here we're using the word venture because it's suddenly become a dangerous place because there was a cat. So they're moving in the kind of way that an adventurer might move. They're being very, very careful, looking around, so they're venturing back into the room, into the feast. The country mouse stopped in the town mouse's den only long enough to pick up her carpet bag and umbrella. Carpet bag? I don't know if that was a thing, that bags were made out of carpets in the past, but I guess so. You may have luxuries and dainties that I have not, she said as she scurried away, but I prefer my plain food and simple life in the country with the peace and security that go with it. So this country mouse uses the word dainties, which I've not come across before, but here it's meaning all those dainty things, all those beautiful little elegant lovely things that the town mouse has that the country mouse does not have in the country, because the country mouse is poor and lives a simple life. So, what's the message of the story? Well, at the bottom it says, poverty with security is better than plenty in the midst of fear and uncertainty. So, you're better off to be poor but safe and happy than have lots of things and live in an environment which is dangerous and scary and stressful. And I guess it seems obvious, but at the same time I think it's true that some people do, like the town mouse, live in an environment which is more dangerous, but they could maybe have the choice of living in a different environment. So, for example, here in the UK, you can live in London and you can have all these different options for all these things to do, galleries to go and see, cinemas near you, restaurants all around you, a busy city with lots of people, so always there's people to meet, there's always festivals or things going on, and you can do that, or you can live in the country and there's a lot less choice ultimately of what you can do. But if you live in the city, you have also the negative things. It's more dangerous, you have pollution that you have to contend with, you also generally work longer hours, life's more stressful, takes a long time to get to work, whereas in the country, life can be simpler, life can be happier, even if you don't have all of those extra things that you do in the city. So I mean, I think it's true to some extent, and I suppose it's something that we can all reflect upon in our own lives. Are we a country mouse or are we a town mouse? And do these things give us benefits, or do they cause too many stresses in our lives? But I think personally it really depends on where you've grown up. Like for me, I live in the same place where I grew up, and I think that's the same for a lot of people. A lot of people stay where they know. So I'm also close to the city, but I still live in the countryside, so I like to think, the best of both worlds. I have two things. Now I'd love you to share your thoughts with me. first of all, are you a country mouse or are you a town mouse? And secondly, what message do you take from this story? What do you think that Aesop is trying to tell the readers of this story? And I suppose this story was aimed at children, really, so what do you think that he was trying to teach children about life, or about how to look at life? So, thanks very much for listening. Now, if you want to, you should maybe go back to the beginning and you can listen again to the actual story, or you can read it, it's below in the description. And that's it, so thanks very much everyone, lovely to see you. I wish you a wonderful day. If you like this video, do give it a like, subscribe, and I will be reading another one of these stories in the future. So, thanks very much, have a wonderful time, and see you soon. Bye!